So I believe that we're at an inflection point with AI. And you can just look at the conference and all the tracks to get a sense that AI will impact everything about, really about us as a society. Now, I think in 100 years, 200 years, when they look back, I think the area that will be impacted most is the area of scientific discovery. And so today I wanted to share a little bit about the vision that Recursion has in the context of drug discovery, and also share about what we're doing to make that vision a reality. And that's really through 3 components of strategy. And these 3 are not going to be surprising to anyone here, but to get them right is very intentional. And that is data, compute, and people. So we all know about ChatGPT at this point and what it can do. And it's amazing in how general it is. It can order you groceries, it can be your code, it can write code for you, and most importantly, it can help you pass AP high school exams. What's amazing about this is how general it is, and I think, and also the amazing user interface. And so I think it's a good exercise to ask, what would the ChatGPT of blank look like in your domain? And for me, that's drug discovery. Now, for those of you not familiar with drug discovery, the process is more or less like this. You have a scientist who has a hypothesis around what is the underlying mechanism of a disease, and they find the target for that, and then they proceed to target that with typically with a small molecule, could be other things. And so you can imagine the ChatGPT in this world may be a medicinal chemist sits down and they say, hey, I want a small molecule that targets this protein with XYZ properties. That would be amazing, right? Well, I think if we do that and if we stop there, that's failure. Yes, that would help improve the process, but that's not where we're going. Where we're really going is autonomous agents for scientific discovery. What you're seeing here are the wet labs at Recursion. They're predominantly automated. We run over 2 million experiments per week, and the data is generated in a highly relatable, consistent manner, fit for purpose for machine learning. But this is only on the wet lab side. On the dry lab side, we also want to be automating and making decisions based on data. And so when we think about how science works, it's really been the same since it was created in the 17th century. And that's not a knock against the method. It's rather, I think we need to double down on it and automate it and accelerate it with AI in the driving seat. So this is the drug discovery pipeline, how Recursion views it. And at each step along those lines, we have these virtuous cycles where we're generating data and then building models to inform decisions that these agents, and right now humans in the loop, can take advantage of. Because we're not going to go to this autonomous agents, in the next few years, but eventually we'll get there. For now, we're going to always have humans in the loop. And we're not alone in this vision. Our scientific advisor, Yoshua Bengio, who's credited as one of the godfathers of AI, he also believes that scientific discovery is going to be revamped with AI. One of the research areas he's particularly excited about is called G-flow nets, and we've incorporated them and have co-published with him on doing just that for molecular design. We have generative models that will produce molecules for our programs after we identify them using our data. So I just want to call out that when I say automate scientific discovery, that sounds bold, and it also puts a little uncomfortable. And I just want to acknowledge that, because I think our job as leaders, this is a conference full of leaders, our job as leaders is to embrace that discomfort. And there's always going to be naysayers, right? But if we listen to those naysayers, things like human flight, things like the semiconductor revolution would have never happened. So my push here is just for us to lean in and to embrace the discomfort. Now, I want to share an example of us doing that Recursion and taking a step towards this autonomous discovery of drugs. And that's when I told the team earlier this year, I said, we're going to build the world's largest phenomic foundation model, and I'm not going to take off this hat until you've done that. We've made a lot of great progress in that area, so I'm going to be taking the hat off pretty soon. But I'm going to be sharing how the steps we've taken to build it so far. When I say phenomic, I'm talking about cellular imagery. These are the images we take, again, over 2 million of these every week, and they encode a lot of biology. An incredible amount of information are in these cells, these pictures of cells, but it turns out you need algorithms to pull out that signal. And we find that once you have those in place, you're able to pull out more information per dollar than any other modality. So how do you translate this vision to reality? Again, there's 3 components: data, compute, and people. Now on data, sorry, my picture went out. On data, the first question people ask is like, how much data do you actually need? And my answer to that is, what stage are you in? I really like this slide from Andre Karpathy from the State of GPT that he gave at Microsoft Build a few weeks ago. In it, he outlines the recipe that they've developed for creating GPT assistant foundation models, i.e. ChatGPT. And it starts with the pre-training stage with vast amounts of data, in their case, the entire internet. And it takes thousands of GPUs for months at a time to train. But as you progress, the amount of data goes down quite a bit. And so it's very important to know what stage you are in, whether or not you can leverage a GPT model or not. In the domain of biology, these data sets don't simply exist. You can't scrape the internet. And so you have to be able to generate them. Lucky for us, that's basically the premise Recursion was built on. And so over the past 10 years, we've generated over 23 petabytes of data that's fit for purpose to train these large-scale models. And it's not just about the quantity, but it's also about the diversity and the scale of it, in that it spans all of biology. It knocks down every gene with CRISPR, and we have over 2 million chemical compounds with diverse structures. And so with that, it gives the model a lot of, again, it spans the space that we're interested in. Now, in GPT land, they have their pre-training task, which is well suited for self-supervised learning, and that's predicting the next token. Here, it's predicting the next word. Now, in our context, what we ended up doing was something pretty similar. We took the images and we used something called masked autoencoders, where we would block off certain parts of the image, and then we asked the model to reconstruct the image. And it turns out by doing this task, the model is able to learn quite a bit about the morphology of cells. So the other thing I would say about data that we've learned is, even if you have a huge amounts of data lying around, you should still invest in generating the ability to generate data. In our case, we wanted to be able to say that our foundation model could work on cell types it had never seen. And so what we did was we generated a data set that had 6 new cell types. And I'm seeing this as a trend in general AI ecosystem, in that we have these different models of different progressions of data maturity. You start out with data collection, which is like the big data mode. And that's, for example, Google, they created a VIT foundation model out of 4 billion images. But more recently, Meta, they created a similar performing model, but it only used 142 million images. And what they did was they curated a data set that spanned the domains that they were interested in. And as a result, they were able to be much more data efficient. And so in that same way, we can do that, but when you do it with data generation, you have far more control. And if you think back to the GPT example, once you get to the fine-tuning of the models, you really need that ability to generate data, which is why I think you don't just need to have a component of data as part of your strategy. You need data generation to make it a reality. So next is compute. My big advice on compute, based on our experience, is to start small. Start small, run ablation studies, and slowly hyperparameter search your way up into a bigger solution. So this is a picture of the headline from the from the GPT assistant slide where it was saying it takes thousands of hours to run a model, train a model, thousands of GPUs, I should say. I want to call out that you shouldn't be afraid of these headlines. Like, don't let them deter you from getting started. Because the reality is, all of these models, they start out small. And I have, my slides don't seem to be working, but there's an example here from GPT-4 paper where they talk about predictable scaling laws. And essentially, they were able to predict how well their large model was able to run by much smaller runs. And so you want to get into that spot where you can do small training runs before you spend millions of dollars on a big training. So at Recursion, the way we've done that, oh wow, that is a really cool, okay, that video is working now. The way we've done that is we have a base layer compute. It's not thousands of GPUs like you hear about. It's still a top supercomputer in the world, and it's enough to allow us to exercise a lot of different models. So at any given time, we'll be using several sets of GPUs, usually 64 at a time, to train various models. But once you do that, once you find that recipe, you really need a strategy to burst to the cloud or otherwise to train the bigger models. And for us, we ended up partnering with NVIDIA because GPU supply chain, you probably all know, it's very constrained. And so we partnered with them so we can have access, priority access to thousands of GPUs when we're ready to make these training runs. And it actually turned out quite helpful because last week we wanted to do a massive workload on our digital chemistry project, and we didn't want to pause this project. And so what we did was we called up NVIDIA, we got a cluster in the cloud the size of BioHive 1, and we were able to predict 2.3 quadrillion drug protein interactions. And so, I bring this up because you need to be able to tell your teams you can go this big. Even if you can't do it always, they need to know that they can think big and reach for those type of models. My other final advice when it comes to compute is really more about training dynamics, and that's just to be patient. This is an example of one of the early training runs that my team was running, and they were getting really kind of frustrated, and they were about ready to kill it, and right then there was this drop. This point of emergence where it had seen a vast number of images, and it went from not performing that pre-training task very well to performing it exceptionally well. And you see this often with these large models. And so even though if you're throwing 64, 256 GPUs at this, know that you have to give it some time. And what the team has been able to do since then is they've been able to tweak the batch sizes, tweak the optimizers, so that we see that first drop earlier on. The other thing I would just call out about this is why this matters. Because at the end of the day, we don't care about reconstructing these images, right? We have enough of them. We care about finding new medicines for patients. And what we have found is that when we see these big drops, those drops correlate with new capabilities that the model is able to perform. So when we talk about the scientific discovery process for drug discovery, that first initial step is generating hypothesis. And that relies on our model's ability to detect new novel biological relationships. So we create a ground set data set of known biological relationships, and this model, this foundation model, is able to vastly outperform our previous model's ability in recapitulating those known relationships. And as a result, that gives us much more confidence in the relationships coming out of this foundation model than our previous models were doing. Then finally, the last component is people. And what's interesting about this is it's dependent on the other two, right? If you want to attract top AI talent in today's market, you need to have a strong strategy around data generation, and then you have to have the tools available, i.e. the compute, for them to be able to do impactful work. So this is the team that's been doing that at Recursion. It's a team comprised of ML scientists, ML engineers, biologists, and people interfacing with the lab. Because it's not just this team that's making this model possible, it's the data generation teams behind it. And beyond that, it's all of Recursion. We have this value called We Are One Recursion, and that's because every person at Recursion is intent on this mission to decode biology to radically improve lives. It's not that we are a big pharma company trying to use AI in this particular area, but rather we're an AI company envisioning what this new technology and these tools can do to the drug discovery space. And I call it out because I think it's really hard to get the culture right so that people are interacting appropriately across roles and functions. But it's really one of the secret sauces that we work really hard at doing at Recursion. And so I just want to call out that culture cannot be discounted when you talk about having a successful AI strategy. So finally, I would just leave with a call to action and ask you, what does this look like in your domain? How are you going to get data generation in place? How are you going to get the adequate compute and the right people to do something amazing and to change the world? Thank you.